All right, so I'd like to kick us off with introducing you all to our Q&A panelists today. We have Kristen Keats, we have Shea Keats, and Michelle Lopez. I'm going to pass the mic to each of us respectively and ask them to introduce themselves and their role and their business. And then also my favorite icebreaker is their superpower, because I always think it's really interesting to know what people are exceptionally good at. So I'm going to start with Kristen. Kristen, go ahead and kick us off.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kristen Keats. I'm the owner of Sherwood Tax and Accounting. Let's see. I don't know that I was prepared with a superpower question, but I think for me, one of my superpowers is my intuition. And sometimes it works for me and sometimes it doesn't work for me. But I've been learning to pay attention to intuition. So I'm going to go with that.
I love it. And now, Shea, how about you?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Shea Keats. I'm the CEO of Breakaway Bookkeeping and Advising. And my superpower, I think I was thinking about this since whenever I was looking at the paper that Tracy sent out, and I was having a really hard time. But I think mine is that I'm able to see all sides of a story. Although sometimes that makes it very hard for me to solve problems. But I would call that my superpower.
That is awesome. That is a superpower. And Michelle, how about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Michelle Lopez with Breakaway Bookkeeping and Advising. And my superpower outside of throwing really fun theme parties is understanding and getting to the core of what people really want. Could be life, could be business, could be a Friday afternoon.
Oh, I love that. And then for those of you who don't know me, I'm Tracy Bech, and I wear two hats. I am the co-founder and co-author of 60-Minute CFO, which is a book and consultancy, and then also of Starboard Collectives, which is a peer-to-peer best practice group. We form groups of best practice sharing. So, and I would say my superpower is two things which seem like they don't go together, but I would say thinking big. So trying to think of what the opportunities are and how to implement those, but then also managing complexity. So trying to make things that are really complex simple, because I think that might actually be how I survive in this world. So that being said, now that you know who we all are, the purpose of this call is to really just pick each other's brains. We really want to hear from you all, your questions for the people on the call, be it for Kristen, if it's about working with your CPA or tax questions, if it's for Michelle, which would be working, with your controller, your CFO, your bookkeeper, or Shea, similarly working with your controller, CFO, and also how to manage businesses, because Shea is a really wonderful leader and manager of Breakaway. And then certainly if you have questions around financial fluency for myself, please go ahead and ask away. And just to keep things organized, what we will do is go ahead and raise your hand if you have a question, if you know how to use the raise hand feature, or type in the chat, or just unmute and give me a high sign. I will be managing those questions and the audience. But to kick us off, I have a question that I have been dying to get in front of Michelle. And so I'm gonna pick on her first. But Michelle, could you just, since we all are finance professionals, could you just talk us through what you think a really good relationship with your finance team looks like?
Absolutely. And you can count on me to circle back to you, Tracy, and ask more questions so that this doesn't feel like a lecture. But I think that a lecture or a relationship should look like one of more partnership. It should be advisory in nature, not just taking orders. And we can kind of unpack what that means. But when I am speaking with my clients, I ask a lot of questions. And the questions look and feel a little bit like, what does success look like to you? And really trying to gain clarity of why they started this business in the first place, so we can create data and metrics to support how we're doing with that success. I also ask questions like, does this growth feel in line with your vision for the company and its trajectory? So again, asking a lot of questions, and then I listen a lot. And I listen for not just the answers, but I listen with my eyes and my like intuition, because I want to know what excites them. What are they answering with enthusiasm, and what are they answering with a little bit of discouragement or dismay? Because I want to understand what pain points are actually happening that maybe we're not addressing. But to be a really great business owner, you need to have a partner or advisor similar to a financial team or something like that to really understand one of two things. One, where are you at? And two, where are you going? And I'm going to come back to these two questions because a lot of people ask me like, well, I have a bookkeeper, so I'm good to go. Let's use a car analogy to understand what a bookkeeper, controller, and CFO, those positions really look like. And I'm going to use forecaster more than CFO, just because I think that's a kind of a title that seems expensive. And really what it is it's someone that's looking forward for you. So car analogy, here we go. The bookkeeper uses the rear view mirror. They're looking at everything that's already happened, everything, in the road that we've already passed. A controller has their hands on the wheel, on the steering wheel. They know your current cash position, what's owed, and who owes you money. And then a CFO is really looking out that windshield, seeing where we're headed, planning our next turns, and anticipating the trail ahead. So circling back to those two questions, where are you at and where you're going? The people that you really need alongside you for your financial team is going to be a controller and more of that forecasting role. Okay. So a good relationship looks like someone that you can have a very vulnerable, honest, transparent conversation that looks a lot maybe like mission and vision casting for your business so that we can understand what success looks like and get you there. So it's a relationship. That's what it looks like.
Oh my gosh, time out. That was so profound, Michelle. I think so. We can call the CFO like the chief forecasting officer. Is that
I was thinking about submitting that to the powers that be to get that changed.
I love it. I think that's so important. I've been using a lot the analogy of if you're not forecasting, it's like using Google Maps without putting a destination in. It's like, okay, here we are. But Google Maps is really powerful, but it doesn't really do that much for you unless you decide you want to go somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And then your CFO can further help you decide what route to take, right? Because there's going to be more than one way to get there. That was so helpful. So for those that may or may not be up to speed on what a fractional CFO does, what does a fractional CFO? Because I know that's a lot what Breakaway does. Can you talk us through that?
Yes, I'd love to. So when a company has a CFO, we've decided today, right now, we're today years old when we've decided it's chief forecasting officer. What that person does is they work for you full time and they're your employee generally or a full-time contractor. A fractional CFO makes this available to everyone in less than full-time capacity. So fractional just means less than whole, right? Language lesson. So Breakaway does a really great job because we pair people with incredible histories and resumes and just amazing ability to communicate with the client, and they can come to you on just a couple hours a month instead of a full-time capacity and really give you the best of them to help you support your business.
So what size business do you need to be? And I'm not trying to make this into a sales pitch for Breakaway by any means, but I do think I get asked this all the time. What size business do you need to be in order to have a fractional CFO?
Well, size is relative because are we talking about, that we could unpack that a lot, but I think if you're desiring growth and want to understand how to better navigate that, you're going to want someone that's really great at forecasting and making a plan. So I think we've had plenty of people at startup phase pre-revenue that have added a fractional CFO because it's a strategic hire in their growth trajectory. So, I mean, I guess it's how big do you want to be? Do you want to feel lost or do you want to have a friend? That's the question, really.
Okay, so size is not the determining factor for whether or not
Yeah.
you should have one.
Right. It's really like, do you have the liquidity to pay for that? And then pay for that also is relative because we have CFOs that are assisting companies on $1,000 a month level, and then it substantially goes up from there. And a lot of it depends on availability, touch points, and experience. So.
Mm-hmm. Right. So fractional can have different levels of fractionality.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So we could be available to you every single day. We could be available to you once a week. We could be available to you once a month. You know, the level of touch points and is really the driver on price.
Oh, that's awesome. That is so cool. I'm going to be thinking about that car analogy for quite some time and using that going forward. I hope that's okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now I mean, I certainly don't want to take all the time with my questions. So anybody, remember, if you have a question and you're listening, please put it in the chat or, raise your hand. I'm watching. But Kristen, can you talk about now what the ideal relationship with your CPA looks like? Because anyone who knows or has gone through the 60-minute CFO training with me has heard me talk about this. And I try not to speak disparagingly of anyone in the profession, but I have some ideas as how to best work with your CPA. And one of the things I love about working with you is you're typically aligned, but maybe we can hear from you how, as a CPA, you think it best works working with your clients.
Yeah, so I think even I'm just pulling out a few nuggets in the sentences that you're saying because there's a lot of confusion around some of the terms that we use. So the term CPA is used, and sometimes when people say CPA, they actually mean tax preparer, which is not necessarily the same thing. There are licensed tax preparers who aren't CPAs, and there's CPAs that don't prepare taxes. So there's kind of a Venn diagram there that you can look at. And so when I think about, when you ask me, like, what does a relationship with a CPA look like, or what should it look like? So that tells me, if you're using the term CPA, that there could possibly be an expectation of beyond just having your tax return prepared. So I think already a lot of folks, when they get into this relationship, there's already going to be a disconnect between their expectations. So if someone like you is advising them, oh, you need to have a CPA, you need to be working with someone on the tax side, and maybe they go find someone who their tax preparer is just expecting, like, oh, I'm going to prepare your business and personal tax returns, and they maybe have one interaction a year, where really what I think you're suggesting is to really have a full service relationship with your tax advisor, CPA, someone that's similar to what Michelle does, we do on the tax side, where you're not just looking in the rearview mirror. And honestly, like, as a tax preparer / CPA, it's very stressful for me when I get a client, I haven't done any planning with them throughout the year, I don't know what's been going on, and then I prepare a tax return, and then I have to deliver it and say, oh, you owe $70,000, and I've had to do this before. And some folks are like, oh yeah, I think I'd made more money, so I was expecting that. But a lot of folks don't like that. And so my advice is always, let's get ahead of it. And then of course they're like, well, what can I do to take that down? And my answer is, well, now, like, very little. There might be some levers that we can pull if we're really, really good. But most of the time has passed for that ship has sailed. And so really what we want to do, and right now at Sherwood Tax, we're reaching out to our clients where by the way, we really shifted our model in the last couple of years to get completely away from only clients that we serve once a year, for this exact reason. Everybody loses when we're just preparing a tax return. I mean, look at the last couple of years that we've had too. I mean, COVID, things are up, things are down. Depending on your business, you could be booming, or inflation could be killing you. Everyone is different. So you can't even make blanket assumptions about what's gonna happen with your tax. So very, very similar to Michelle, what we recommend to our clients is, at a minimum, we're touching base with you at one additional point during the year than just your tax return. And ideally for our business owner clients, we're plugging in quarterly. And then we're coordinating that with your internal team, your outsourced CFO, whoever else is on that financial team of yours. You know, in some cases, you know, someone like Michelle's the quarterback. Sometimes I'm the quarterback, where we're pulling in all the professionals and getting everybody on the same page. So in my mind, that's our ideal client relationship. That's what that looks like.
I recently saw a stand-up comic who described an accountant as somebody who can identify problems but can't solve them, which was his way of poking at it, right? But to your point, how are you supposed to help the client that you talk to once a year, once the year has gone by and they owe $70,000 in tax and they don't want to owe that? Like the way to fix that is to do what you are suggesting, which is to have touch points quarterly, make strategies along the way to help reduce that tax burden or prepare for the tax burden, whichever.
Right. I mean, and the other thing I'm going to advocate for my fellow tax preparers a little bit here too, because when you've got like what traditionally tax preparers have been dealt is we have a ton of demand during the first 3 months of the year. Okay. And of course, people want low price. They don't want to pay a lot to have their tax return done. So we've got all this stuff coming in, during one time of the year, if you don't go on extension. And so what I'm really advocating to do is, first of all, as many clients as possible, I want to put on extension, because I want to be able to spend as much time as possible, going in and really making sure that tax return reflects what actually happened. The other thing that I want to do, and I'm kind of at the point, and I've been a tax person for over 25 years. So this is just my lens that I see everything through, because I can look at someone's tax return, and it's really, when I do someone's taxes, it's a deep dive. I'm going in their books. I'm looking in the details of their transactions. I really learn a lot about a client. But what I can't learn from that is that a lot of times I don't even really understand what their business is and what they're doing. Like, are they someone that could benefit from a R&D, research and development credit? Are they someone who could benefit from a cost segregation study? Are they doing, like, these are things, if I'm rushing and just getting a tax return out the door, you are not getting advisory services during that process at all. That's an additional layer that has to happen, not at that point in time.
Oh my gosh, so true. And that just sounds so much less stressful for the business owner too.
Yes, I think once I get them past that initial, the IRS has done such a good job of that April 15th deadline, of imprinting that in everyone's minds that you have to, I'm going to go to jail if I file an extension. Like, once I kind of get, I know we laugh as finance professionals because we're just like, oh my gosh, but that truly, like, a lot of times I have to battle that. And so what I've tried to do with each of our clients is lay out what I call the tax roadmap. It's like, this is how this goes. This is the seasonality. And so I find that if I can manage their expectations about what happens and when, and they know what's coming next, I can take that anxiety down a little bit about their taxes. That's my whole goal, is like, let's calm it down. Let's slow it down. Let's get into a Zen-like state where we can like address all these tax issues that just people's blood pressure just automatically, the 3 letters IRS just raise the blood pressure.
Totally. And when you do take that more proactive approach, right? And if that's not the first time you've sat down, these little stress nuggets have been reduced over time, right? Like, we're not trying to eat it all at once and swallow that.
And you can see it in the client. I mean, to Michelle's point, where you're looking and listening and kind of getting that vibe from them, you can see their shoulders go down. You can see them go, I'm going to be okay. They go like, oh, okay. Because I can't just keep, and a lot of times we'll just say to me, like, we got this. Yeah, we're all over it. Yep, we got that. But again, I can't do it if I'm only seeing them once a year. I can't do it if I'm just preparing a tax return. It just doesn't happen, So I think it's for a lot of us is managing that expectation of like, and so now we're getting better at, like, even in that initial client contact with Sherwood Tax, we kind of, because people Google tax preparer, Sherwood, Oregon, and then we pop up. And so when we answer the phone, we're like, just so you know, we're not the H&R Block, so it's don't compare apples to oranges, if you're kind of shopping around.
Exactly. And that is what I would say, that there are, and tell me if you agree with this, Kristen, but I would say there's sort of 2 schools of accounting right now. there's sort of old school, new school, where old school is status quo. You meet with your clients once a year. It's a big stressful April 15th deadline, and we just pay the taxes and we rush through it as fast as we can. And the new school is advisory.
Yep.
Right. Where it's like, hey, just so you know, I do want more out of you as the business owner.
Well, and it's really interesting. And I call it the rainbow, because I think about the Wizard of Oz, and I think about when Dorothy lands and she opens the door and she goes from the black and white to the rainbow. That's what I imagine, because here's the thing, to be able to free ourselves up enough to be in the rainbow world, we have to be tech forward. We have to be paperless. We have to really streamline our systems and processes as much as possible. And sometimes clients buck at us a little bit because they hate our portal and they hate but I'm like, this is how we do this other thing. You want to be in the rainbow world, we have to go through, you have to be on the cloud. You have to be on QuickBooks Online. You can't be, we have these like certain things that they have to hit to be able, but at the end you get this prize, you get and your prize is that we have a relationship where we can be proactive for you.
Kristen, maybe I think that we did gloss over one of your superpowers, which is using technology. I think integrating and being on top of that for sure. Because I just learned before we even jumped on, she was teaching me a little technological piece of Zoom. That's for a whole nother piece of her call. But she is definitely the most tech savvy CPA I have.
Right. I'll take it. Yes.
I want to get to a question from Sean, who is our very first audience member question, who asked, how do you measure the impact of a CFO? I had a fractional CFO, but I never got the value. I was going to kick that over to Michelle. Michelle, what do you say to that?
Yeah, so let's start with the groundwork, because a really great CFO needs to have something to work with. So in the instances where, I'm very open and honest that it hasn't been a good experience for me nor the client when I've stepped in, is because there was no urgency or respect given to prior bookkeeping being done. And so it's really hard for a CFO to be able to get a good grasp of where we are and where we're going without knowing what's happened. And so bookkeeping is always, in my opinion, a means to an end. It's a really important piece of the puzzle. And so that is where, when people say, I've had a really bad experience before, I said, how committed were you to the cleanup? Because it's you got to have that. So there's that. But I'm going to jump ahead and assume that that's done. How do you measure the impact of a CFO? I think is a really great question. Is I would lean into, how confident are you with your financials and how well do you understand them? And a great kind of measuring stick for that is, has your financial acumen increased? Have they taken you on a journey of education? Do you know more because of the relationship? Do you have a good grasp on your revenue targets? You and the CFO or fractional CFO have been working together to produce these forecasts. Within that are going to be revenue targets. Do you know what those are? Do you know where you are in relationship to those for the month? Also a great question to understand how well a CFO is doing is, have you worked with them to identify like linchpins in your workflow, or like a who or a what is kind of holding you from getting to where you want to be? Also, do you know what your cash position looks like? So a great metric for how well your CFO is doing is actually reflecting on your own understanding. So if you know more about your business, if you have a firm grasp on what's going on, that's actually a really strong indicator that your CFO and you have a really great relationship and they're doing a good job. So the theme is clarity. That's the best metric for how it's going.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the same is true. And Kristen, correct me if I'm wrong, but for if your CPA is having an impact, right? Like if you feel clear and you understand how much you owe and why and what are the drivers of that, and you're asking questions to get clarity, but that CPA is able to answer them in a way that lands.
Absolutely,
right? Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's funny because a lot of whenever I have a new potential client come to me, I always ask why now? Why are you calling me? Who is your other preparer? Like, I always want to learn like what happened, and communication in some form or another usually is at the top of the list. And as part of that, a lot of times what I hear is, my CPA only spoke accountant to me. And I know, Tracy, you talked about this at the beginning as your superpower, right? Because, and I agree. And I love that. And what I try to, even when I'm like mentoring staff and things like that, I think it's real easy for us to, we throw words around like capitalize and depreciation and blah, 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 blah. And we like to have our like terminology, but I'm just like, but again, what Michelle said, read their face. Is their face telling you that they're like, yeah, I'm with you, I got you. Oh yeah, and this and that. Or is their face like this, and you ask, do you understand it? And they're like, yeah, okay. Because people, nobody wants to feel dumb. And a lot of times I think I've noticed some folks and financial advisors like to be the smartest person in the room. And I want the client to feel like they are getting smarter by being in the room. And that, because God knows, I'm not going to know if they're telling me about their construction business or they're telling me, I'm not going to know any of that. And so let's just, like Michelle was saying, let's be partners with each other. Let's leverage off with it, because they're going to know things about their business and in their industry that's very specific that I can always learn about to help advise them better. But yes, I think communication is number one priority with all financial professionals.
It is so true. I have been that person whose face you would be reading. My background is not in finance, and I have had to fire multiple CPAs because I felt like the dumbest person in the room constantly with them. And it was like adding insult to injury when I would get the bill for their services and for taxes. And I was like, this still isn't landing for me. And it's taken me, I've been in business for myself 20 years, in the last 7, 8 of which I've finally been able to advocate for myself, my business, and ask more of the finance team, which is why
yeah, that's what I wish more clients would do. I wish more clients would have that. But I know it's vulnerable, right? To be like, hang on, I'm sorry, you just said a word that I don't know what that word means. And can we back up? Because can we just get to, and then circle back if they don't get your question answered, and really be, it's almost like they tell you to be at the doctor too, right? You have to advocate for yourself. And it goes the same with your financial professional too. And if they don't do it, or if they refuse, or they'll be like, don't worry about it, you don't need to know. Or if they're dismissive, I would say, it's really time to move on.
Yeah. Through working with clients at 60-Minute CFO who are becoming financially fluent, I've had clients who have come to their CPA and said, hey, I'm taking this class, I'm becoming educated, and I need to know these things so that I can calculate these ratios. And their CPA said, you don't need to know, don't worry about it. And I said, I'm so sorry, but you need to fire that CPA. That's not the answer that you are looking for.
That's crazy.
That's not the way we want that to go. Okay, I have a question for Shea, and this came from Julie. Her question is around suggestions for online continuing education resources for someone who wants to expand their skill set from a bookkeeping role into more of a controller, forecaster, and analytical role. Shea, I know you work with bookkeepers who are asking this exact same question all the time. What would you recommend?
So, Tracy, I'm going to throw it right back to you, because the first thing that we recommend is to take the 60-Minute CFO course, preferably the live cohort. We have had many of our advisors say, after they have really who came in, who self-identified as a bookkeeper, took that course, and then all of a sudden had the confidence to start calling themselves a CFO and really start to own that. So I think that is a great place to start. I think, and this is not trying to skirt the question about what resources are out there, because there are so many, and I think we could talk about all of the various different bookkeeping courses out there. We always recommend going in. We call it our sash, like our scout sash, where you want to get all of your different little badges on there. So you want to get your QBO certification, your Xero certification. You want to join various accountant communities out there. There are wonderful ones with programs like FreshBooks, Rippling, all of these different softwares that are supporting small businesses, have certifications, and have communities. So get in there, join those, start having conversations. But the number one thing that we talk about with our bookkeepers as they are trying to make that jump from bookkeeper to controller or CFO is you have to own that, and you have to be confident in that, because as we know with technology, and I'm not saying that bookkeepers are going anywhere. I don't think you should be running for the hills and afraid for your jobs with the advance of AI. But I do think the industry for bookkeepers is going to look wildly different. So if you can't have the confidence to say, yes, I am a controller, and yes, I can educate myself to be more of a CFO, then all of the courses and badges in the world are not going to actually help you get there. And I think the last thing I would recommend is really join a community of like-minded accounting professionals. Again, we talked a little bit about the accounting communities, but something like Breakaway is just one of many examples of where you can join a community of people who are like-minded and who are really going to champion you. And that's the other thing that we've seen with our advisors, is just this ability to have mentors and work with other people who are going to see things in them that they don't see in themselves, and then encourage them to take those out into the world.
Yeah. I saw somebody wrote, we love all the badges.
Yeah, definitely.
Shea, this might be a good chance for anyone who's not familiar with Breakaway. Can you just describe what Breakaway is and how it works? Because it's such a unique, it's so unique, the ecosystem.
Thank you. Yeah, well, Kristen, Michelle, and I are very proud. So it's a unique model for both our advisors who are franchisees and our clients who, again, are engaging always on the fractional level and always at the completely remote level. So we are a 100% remote company. We started in fall 2019. So pandemic, it was what it was, but it was a bit of a stroke of luck for us because everyone got used to that idea of working remotely. But, there are a few things that I jotted down when I was thinking about this question. And the first is, because our advisors are franchisees, they are business owners. And this is so important. So whether as a small business owner, you're working with Breakaway or another CFO or financial professional, you want somebody who actually understands what it means to be a business owner, what it means to be up at 3 a.m. because you don't know if you're going to make payroll, what it means to be like nervously watching the news. Are we going into a recession? What's going to happen? You want someone who can really come alongside with you, and not somebody, again, not that we don't love our accountants at the big firms, but as a small business owner, they are not going to relate to you in the same way. And then what we can offer as Breakaway that's really unique is our community. And yes, there are plenty of great professionals out there who are just hanging up their shingle. But when we have advisors and they have a question that they don't know the answer to, they don't have to fake it. They can just say, hey, you know what? I'm going to go back to my team. I'm going to lean into them. I'm going to see what they have to say. And combined, we really have hundreds of years of experience and professionals who are able to help one another. And some really beautiful mentorships have sprung up that we've been so happy to see supporting, both our more mature advisors with our younger advisors and vice versa, because there's so much technology and so many things changing out there. So I think. And then one other thing I really want to underscore about what Breakaway does is that our advisors come, they set their ego aside, and both Kristen and Michelle touched on this, which is building your board of directors. We don't expect any one financial professional to go in there and be your be all end all. But because we're able to come in very, objectively, we can ask those questions, like you said, Tracy, like, hey, is your CPA really serving you? I think you might need to talk to a wealth manager. I think you might need to think about this. I think you might need to use a bookkeeper, because sometimes we're not performing that function. They have, grandma doing it or something. And we're able to ask those hard questions without any, really without any consequences, right? So we're able to be that mirror for them. And then again, I think why we love Breakaway and why we love fractional work is we are allowing small businesses to have this level of support who would never have been able to have it in the past, because the idea of hiring a CFO, even a very moderately priced one, you're looking probably at least in the low six figures, plus full benefits, plus a bonus, plus all of this stuff. And again, as Sean said, whether they're fractional or not, how do you measure the impact of a CFO? We're able to create these packages for our clients that cover all of this. They're not cheap. We're not a price leader, right? But they're still able to get the client what they need at a fraction of the cost of a full-time in-house CFO.
Yeah.
So
yeah. The reason that I know these guys is because I needed, finance professionals who were advisory in nature. And I also needed them to have bookkeeping power behind them. And, as somebody who teaches financial fluency and financial fluency in community, what I get is the end product of what someone like Breakaway does, right?
Mhm.
So what I was finding is garbage in, garbage out. We've all heard that phrase. And I had to solve the garbage in problem. And that is, it's a really big one. So like what Shea is saying, but people's resistance to that is, well, I know how to use QuickBooks, but I've already got someone doing it. They're doing an okay job. And it's like, and so then if you finally, get to the point where you're ready to hire someone new, the thing that I was noticing is that all of the quote unquote really good bookkeepers are full, not taking any more clients. And it's hard to, or they graduate and go get a job at, internally someplace as a CFO. And there's this beautiful space that Breakaway has created that is a very happy place for people to stay and have longevity in their roles as bookkeeper, controller, and CFO, because they get to play all three roles with different clients. And it's just a very sustainable piece for me to know that my clients are, people that I'm working with and I'm getting information out of. It just fits really well so that all of that financial fluency can sit on top of that. That was such a key thing that I was running into for this limiting. That's like the very first step, is getting that information.
And I think, Tracy, one other thing that I wanted to mention that Breakaway really leans into is what we call our blended shore teams. So this is offshore, nearshore, and onshore support. So each of our advisors build a team that works for them. But as you just said, it allows them to be with a client for a very long time, because at no point is a client going to graduate, or are we not going to be able to have the skill set to serve them, because we can go up or go down as needed with the client. And we really love being able to be invested in that transformation over time.
Yeah, it's so scalable. It just seems to really plug that, hole that I had otherwise seen, as it's very painful. It's a very painful thing to not have working correctly in your business.
Well, and the funny thing is like, without any kind of accounting or financial expertise, how do you know if that person's doing a good job or not? I mean, because we have, like, whenever we get a new client, I know Breakaway is the same. When we get a new client, we have to go and do an onboarding process, which involves evaluating, their current status of their books. And I would say, if it's not 100% of the time, it's in the high 90s, that they have no idea. I mean, sometimes they will know. Sometimes they're like, yeah, they know that things aren't caught up. If they're kind of savvy enough that they want to pull reports and things like that, they'll know if it's not. Usually if it's really, really bad, they know. But for the most part, clients have no idea if it's good or not,
Yeah. And that is where, that's kind of my mission in life, is to help, business leaders have that financial fluency so that you don't have to live and breathe and sleep and eat finance. You're good at what it is that you do in your business, right? And that's a skill, a craft, a trade, it's a service, it's a product. You don't have to also be the business finance leader of the universe, but finance is the language of business. It does come along with the day that you incorporate it, right? It just is a piece of it, whether you want it there or not.
And if we go back to the car analogy, like, I own a car, I'm not a mechanic. I don't know how things work, but I have to put gas in it. I know I have to get my oil changed. And at the end of the day, when I take it into the mechanic, I have to, and maybe sometimes I get a second opinion. Yes. But I have to rely on the opinions of professionals and just leave it up to them. And I realize there are some people who do it themselves with the car. So this may or may not land with the people who do consider it, but I'm just saying, it's just an example. You fill in the blank. Plumbing. I don't know how toilets work really, but I know when mine's not working. And so I call the expert in for that. And at some point you do have to trust the process and trust the expertise of other people.
Yeah, you definitely do.
And take responsibility for your own part in it. And I agree that as a business owner, the business owner needs to know when to change the oil, business owner needs to keep gas in it, business owner needs to do these certain things that we can help them with on all sides of the relationship.
Yeah, yeah. Getting the good information that you can trust, I think is step one. And then, I always recommend, is understanding a few key relationships in your numbers. So if anyone here is already looking at numbers or you have good numbers, the next step is to find ratios that you like to look at, things like your profit, but not just your profit as a percentage of revenue, right? And that goes from being profit to being profit margin. And your assets, your debt and your equity. And when you start to look at your debt with respects to equity, that becomes your debt to equity ratio, and these are things that, I always like to remind people that we as humans, it's so tricky because finance and math is not everybody's, math is not everybody's favorite subject in school, right? And it's numbers, and they don't typically really have a lot of life to them. But the way you make them tell a story and become more interesting is by looking at them in relationship to something else. And so that takes your reports that you look at every month from just a bunch of numbers to a story that you can track over time. That's
well, and Tracy, I want to applaud you there because I think that's the beauty of what you've done with the 60-minute CFO, because I feel like exactly what you said your superpower was. I feel like that's what that program does, is it takes this big scary thing. I mean, honestly, even as a finance or a numbers professional, accountants, as we are trained, we don't deal in KPIs. We don't deal in typically forward looking. We weren't trained on that. It's a muscle that we have to flex. And so, yeah, I mean, I just wanted to point out that's a beautiful part of the program. So
yeah. And it's just like it's like that. How can I dip my toe in the water and make it kind of fun? I don't really want to do this, and I think ratios are a great gateway to that, right? It's like, okay, well, and it's also that way of creating those KPIs, tracking performance, and it just makes one of my favorite books is Great Game of Business. It turns business into a game. Right? It's like, are we winning? How can we build on this? Are we close? Did we make progress towards or away from, that goal and that metric? It just makes it so much more fun. So it can be fun. Let's see. I know people are having to step away, and I want to make sure if there's any more questions that we get to them. And I do have one that I really love. It is Friday. And I know that there's, in talking to Michelle, I know that there's this like amazing set of numbers that she recommends, since we're talking about numbers that we look at, that she recommends everybody looks at on their way out toward the weekend. Michelle, could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes, this is my favorite report that I send out to my clients every week. And the name changes depending on what language we like to use together. My favorite one is the dance card. So on Friday, my client will get the dance card, and the dance card has information, but the 3 things that are important so that you can have a fantastic weekend and sleep at night and enjoy all of the company and libations really fully, is the first is your cash position. So what does your cash position look like? How much liquid cash do you have that is available to you? And then I like to compare that to prior week. So if it went up, I turn that number green. If the number went down, I turn the number red, but that's not the whole story because we got to get there. Okay, that's the first chapter of the book. The second chapter of the book is accounts receivable, right? So did our accounts receivable go up? If it went up, it's green. If it went down, it's red. But again, that's not the whole story because we have to understand how cash and accounts receivable work together, right? And so I'm adding the narrative on, okay, so your cash went up and your accounts receivable went up. Hallelujah. Like that is an incredible week. That is a full send win. And then the third metric that we're going to look at is how are you doing on your revenue target? How much of the month has been completed and how far have you gotten on your revenue target? So it's a ratio, but what's great about an advisor is your business may not run linearly through the month. So it's important to understand how your revenue rolls and how your revenue target is going compared to where you are in the month. And those are the three things on Friday that I send my clients so that they can have a killer weekend knowing exactly how their business is doing.
What a good feeling. I think, what did we have lunch a couple weeks ago? And you were like, I got to go back to the office and get my dance cards out so everyone can have a good weekend, right?
Yeah.
Because there are those.
And I'll put those in the chat so that the three, I'll put it.
Check what I wrote because I was writing as you were speaking.
Oh, perfect. Oh, thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, you're so smart. Okay.
So here's my question on percent to revenue target, the last one.
Mm-hmm.
You set the weekly targets, like, because some people do, they bill everything at the beginning or everything at the end of the month, right? So you would expect weeks 2 and 3 to maybe not have a lot of increase in accounts receivable. Do you think it's a good idea to get that granular with this? Or do you just kind of explain, hey, we wouldn't expect there to be an increase in accounts receivable this week, it's the second week? Like how granular do you get with this?
Yeah, so I really like a solid through line for my businesses. The goal is to get consistent billed revenue throughout the month. Now, let's say for the moving and storage industry, that's not going to happen because their major push is at the beginning and the end of the months. So this is where that advisor piece is crucial. Mm-hmm. Understanding what your industry looks and feels like, and is there any flexibility in there? And how to get that, because the end all be all biggest goal of all is cash flow, right? So if we're thinking about cash flow, we can get really creative on, let's say traditionally your industry has been cash heavy at the end or the beginning of the months. Does that mean we can't do something about it? And actually we have gotten pretty clever on ways to facilitate steady cash flow through the month, and especially through the year. Like that can be really tricky too. Mm-hmm. So get someone to have clever, creative, innovative conversations on how to improve cash flow for your business and how that aligns with your personal idea of success, because more money does not necessarily mean a great life. We want to understand, why did you start this business in the first place? And how do we get the most out of this so that you can seek the happiness that you deserve, because you're a courageous business owner.
That's right. And what gets measured gets managed.
Yeah.
So when you do see this every Friday and you're like, oh, 2 weeks out of the month, the accounts receivables were down.
Right.
I don't really like that. Like that wasn't my favorite Friday metric to receive 2 out of those 4 weeks of the month. I would like to change that. That sort of starts to plant those seeds for Monday to come in and be like, let's build some work. Let's build some revenue. Let's get this cash flow evened out, right? Like this is going to ultimately do the right things for my business. If that's
yeah. And with the banner of clarity, sometimes getting there requires curiosity. And as a financial professional, I can ask and beg and plead for the same information over and over again. But if I can't motivate you to get curious about this, then I can't get you there. So in the theme of clarity, when we have 2 weeks of down AR, that's going to spike curiosity. And then we're going to find those linchpins that we had been discussing.
Right. And now it's bite size and tangible. It's not like, oh my God, cash flow, right? It's like, no, we're just trying to increase accounts receivable on the second and third week of the month. And I think, and now it's like, you can sit down with the sales team, you can sit down with operations, you can start to think about like, well, what are some things we could do? Marketing, we can, like there's all these other strategic things that business owners are great at, right? Like that is like why, you're all at the table. So it just takes these things that seem nebulous, and like literally in previous lives, I've been like, if you were to say to me, somehow we need to increase cash flow in, the second and third week of the month, I'd be like, what are you talking about? Like that's you would need to unpack that so detailed for me. Yeah. And
I think you had a LinkedIn post where you said like the most expensive phrase is, that's the way we've always done it. And a lot of times the slowness on week 2 and 3, and you turn to your project managers or your billing department and you're like, oh, well, we didn't send them out because we've always sent them out on the 4th week. Why are you holding up this cash thing? Or like to the account managers, why aren't you calling on AR?
Yeah.
Why have you not picked up the phone? And they're like, oh, because I've never done that. We've never done it that way.
Yeah.
How about we do it different.
Yeah.
Let's try it
And-
on for size.
Yeah, we talk a lot about that in the 60-minute CFO training. And I've made that, like, I'm like, everyone make it somebody's job. If you have more than, if you have accounts receivable that are 60 days and older, make it someone's job this week to call on all of those accounts. And it was illuminating. People uncovered other companies that say, well, we hold back any invoices more than $1,000 until we get a phone call.
Yep.
It's like, oh, huh, good to know. It's directly impacting that accounts receivable, the cash flow, everything. And it just takes somebody's, phone ringing. So
Yeah.
don't recommend doing that to anyone managing payables, but yeah, managing receivables, it definitely makes a difference. Yeah. So it is Friday and we are coming up on our hour. So I hope everyone is at least, screen grabbing this or copying and pasting these notes that Michelle just gave us, because it's one of those things. It's like, I wonder what this is. And, speaking back to Kristen's like shoulders dropping, anything that you can do, right, to kind of bring it all down is just so nice, because yeah, we spend a lot of time up here during the week. We at least have to dip the weekend to get our shoulders down. So thanks everyone for joining us. I want to make sure, are there any last questions? Because what Michelle just said was so wonderful and juicy. We might have some more follow-ups before we all say goodbye. Sounds like we've got them.
And two, like if you're joining this call and you're an accounting professional and you're thinking about starting your own business, we'd love to talk to you too. So, we love client service, but we also like making a really great landing place for assisted entrepreneurship. And what we mean by that is you want to start your business, we want to come alongside and help you get that going.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, if you need to follow up with anyone here, I think, Kristen, where do you prefer people connect with you?
I can unmute myself, I'll tell you. You said I was great with technology, right? So yeah, LinkedIn is great. I'm also on Twitter. So I'm at Kristen Keats, CPA on Twitter, and I'm on LinkedIn just under my name, Kristen Keats. So welcome to reach out through either of those means.
Perfect. And Shea, how about you?
So I just popped it in the chat, but you can connect with me on LinkedIn, or I'll put my email as well, and would love to hear from anybody, even if you just want to say hi.
And Michelle, how about yourself?
Bat signal, messenger pigeon, what are those things called that back in the
Morse
day?
code.
Yeah, no, I popped in my LinkedIn and my email, and I'd love to chat with you guys, even virtual coffee, it'd be great.
Yeah, likewise. And I'm putting my contact info in the chat. And this will be recorded. And, we'd love to stay connected. We will likely do this again. It's so much fun. We love chatting with one another. We love chatting with everyone. Thanks for those who asked questions. And if you didn't get it in and you want to pop it into one of our inboxes, be sure to do that. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend and a safe and happy 4th.
Thank you.
Thanks, you guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.